My kingdom is not of this world. Jesus the Christ. The government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. John Adams, founding father. On July 20th, 1944, a bomb was planted in a room where Adolf Hitler was going to be. The hope was simple. A group of Germans, including Lutheran pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer, desperate to end the war, desperate for peace, had decided that the only way to accomplish this was to kill Hitler. The plan failed. Hitler narrowly escaped, and the result? He became even more convinced that he was God's chosen, that his mission was God's mission, and that his reign of terror could not be questioned. And if you've ever seen the film of him, showing Mussolini the scene of the failed attempt on that very same day, it's all over his face. Hitler did not die that day, but any hope of peace did. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer, one of the brightest theological voices of his time, eventually paid for his actions against Hitler with his life. From the earliest days, the people of Israel were to be a people set apart, taking their leadership from God and under the rule of no earthly king. But the people, of course, wanted a king. Even as the prophet Samuel tried to tell them, look, a king is going to take your daughters for his harem, your sons off for his wars. He is going to tax you until you feel oppressed and demand complete obedience. Samuel essentially said, be careful what you ask for. But hey, everyone else had a king. And so the people whined and they whined, and finally God just said, okay, you got it. Well, after the failed kingship of Saul, there was David. And the success of the Davidic kingship was never forgotten in the centuries that followed. The allure and the memory of its wealth and its power became like a fine wine in Israel. Oh, once opened, it was hard to resist. Jesus came into an Israel oppressed. An Israel where the stories of how God had once joined the armies of Israel to vanquish their foes were being told with fervor among the people. And when Jesus spoke and acted with the power of God, the hopes of those who longed for victory by the sword just swelled. And they were filled with dreams of David. And no doubt Rome, who was always dealing with these pesky Israelites, a people you could never quite conquer, but kind of had to make, an agreement with. No doubt Rome saw in Jesus a potential threat, even as Jesus was no threat at all. For Jesus, like all those who hear the voice of God most clearly, was calling people to a different kind of kingdom. One without flags or a capital or a house or a senate. Jesus called people to the kingdom of God, a kingdom that was beyond national or political borders, a kingdom of love, equality, and justice for all people. And in the beginning, the followers of Jesus lived this idea out. Many gave up their professions because their professions required that they hurt or oppress others. They learned to eat with people they previously would have thought below them or above them, or people they would have considered outright enemies. It was a kingdom, a movement that defied politics and offered a life with a far grander vision than the vision any worldly power seeking its own place on the world stage could ever hope to offer. But that, of course, changed. It changed with Constantine. And it changed even more a few years later when Rome declared Christianity the religion of the empire. And now, all the wealthy folk, all the political folk, all the powerful folk, they were part of the flock. And the ideals that Jesus had instilled in his followers got watered down or lost. Soon there were Christians killing, something unheard of in the first 300 years of the faith, killing pagans who refused to convert, burning down their temples, coming to view empire and Christ, emperor and church, as one and the same. Of course, it was understandable that the church would cave. I mean, come on. You watch your friends, your family, your leaders get crucified or thrown to lions for a couple of hundred years, and yes, you are going to jump at the chance when the big boys say, hey, why don't you try being in charge? It seemed like a golden opportunity. Maybe it was. But like so many things in the world that are pure, the way of Jesus became blurred in the allure of the power and control that all that was Rome handed the church. I think we can all agree, I hope we can all agree, that government is necessary. Maybe a necessary evil. But we Christians tread the same difficult terrain those first Christians tread so long ago. How do we be faithful to Christ and serve our country? How do we be true to the kingdom of God and be responsible as a citizen of the United States or Great Britain or any country in the world? Can we serve two masters? There are days when I really struggle with this. But I have to say, I don't think we have any choice but to try. The story of Bonhoeffer is instructive because it shows how difficult, how harrowing it can be to take what appears to be a very solid political action, in this case, an assassination that most people would construe as absolutely necessary, and see how it actually cemented evil. It is a living, breathing example of how the road to hell can be paved with good intentions. Because political life is so tricky, so perilous, we Christians have to approach our world and recognize, even as we seek to be faithful to our country, that our country is not the ultimate reality. No country ever has been. And to assume otherwise is kind of to mock history, but more importantly, to mock Christ, who on this day we dare to call King. So we are called to a citizenship informed by those words we say so often here in church. People of God, what does the Lord ask of us? But to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with our God. And if our citizenship takes this form, we can begin to hopefully see that our land, if it is to do God's will, needs to be a land for all people. That our land, if it is to do God's will, must seek to treat all of its people equally. That our land, if it is to do God's will, needs to work for more than itself, but for justice throughout the world. That our land, if it is to do God's will, needs to, whenever possible, not be insistent on its own way, but rather to seek understanding and the humble path of love and mercy. It goes without saying that there has to be a difference between president and Christ, between flag and bread and wine. There is always the higher call of God, and a country at her best can never surpass that call, but only seek to meet it. In its purest form, the people of Israel were to be a people set apart, living under God as an example to the nations in whatever nation they found themselves in. We Christians share much the same calling, even as we serve as mayors and soldiers and senators and even presidents. And yes, it is a challenge. But it's a challenge that, if we answer it, could start to change the world.